Today, we're diving into the world of Hungarian cinema. And believe me, it's an art form you just can't understand without getting into the turbulent and often tragic history that shaped it.
You know, you could ask that about any culture, right? But Hungary's 20th century, well, it gives us a uniquely intense answer. For its filmmakers, history wasn't just some backdrop. It was the raw material. It was the pressure cooker that forged this incredibly powerful and distinct cinematic language.
For these directors, the camera was never just for entertainment. I mean, in a century defined by one conflict after another, it became a tool for survival, a way to preserve memory, and honestly, a way to capture a really difficult truth.
So to really get these films, we first have to get the history that made them. This is the story of a nation that was repeatedly broken and then remade by these massive, epic forces of the 20th century.
Just think about this timeline for a second. First, the collapse of a whole empire after World War I, then the utter devastation of World War II, then a heroic revolution in 1956 that gets brutally crushed, and after all that, decades spent behind the Iron Curtain. Every single one of these events left a deep scar on the national psyche, and you better believe filmmakers would return to these wounds again and again.
And out of all those huge events, there's one we really need to zoom in on. That's the 1956 revolution. Its failure would echo through the nation's culture for decades to come. For 12 short days, the Hungarian people rose up against Soviet rule. It was this brief, incredible, heroic moment of freedom that was just savagely crushed by tanks. This event became a defining national trauma, a wound that would both haunt and, in a strange way, inspire its artists for generations.
So after the crackdown, this weird new system comes into being, and people start calling it goulash communism. Think of it as this strange compromise. The state kept absolute political control, but it allowed for a few more consumer goods, a slightly looser grip on culture than, say, other Eastern Bloc countries. And this created a very specific and tricky environment for artists to work in.
So, okay, put yourself in their shoes. You're a filmmaker. You can't talk directly about the government or the '56 revolution or any of the system's failures. So what do? Well, you get really good at mastering the art of the hidden message.
Allegory became the essential tool for artistic survival. Directors learned how to speak in code. They crafted these stories that seemed to be about one thing on the surface, but were actually about the oppressive reality they were all living in. This wasn't some artsy choice. It was a necessity.
And a perfect example of this in action is Péter Boxó's 1969 film, The Witness. It's maybe the most famous allegorical satire of the entire era.
So the film follows this simple, ordinary dam keeper who gets pressured into being a witness in a completely ridiculous show trial. And through this dark, absurd comedy, it just brilliantly exposes the total illogicality and paranoia of the regime. Of course, the authorities, they did not find it funny. It was banned for over 10 years, which naturally only made it an even bigger legend.
And then 1989 happens. The Iron Curtain falls. The era of censorship and speaking in code is suddenly over. All at once, filmmakers are free to speak directly. And this unleashes this powerful, raw, and often pretty bleak new wave of cinema.
The style of this new era was just unmistakable. Gone were the hidden messages. Instead, you got this direct, unflinching confrontation with trauma. Directors started favoring these stark black and white visuals, incredibly long meditative takes, and they really focused on the spiritual and social exhaustion that was left after communism collapsed.
And if there's one name that has come to define this entire post-communist art house landscape, it's got to be the master filmmaker, Béla Tarr.
Béla Tarr is a giant of what people call slow cinema. And yeah, his films are definitely not for the impatient, but there's a powerful reason for his style. You have to remember, after decades of state propaganda and just noise, Tarr's long meditative takes forced the audience to simply sit and watch and observe the reality of what was left, the rain, the mud, the spiritual decay. To watch his work is to feel the exhaustion of that time.
And his visual style reflects this perfectly. You're not just looking at a landscape, it's more like a soulscape. There's this desolate beauty to it, an atmospheric weight that is just pure Béla Tarr. Honestly, his films often feel less like stories and more like states of being. So that incredible legacy of confronting history while pushing the art form forward continues today. A whole new generation of Hungarian directors has gained massive international acclaim, and each one of them is finding their own unique way to grapple with the past. First up,
Laszlo Nemes. He's a director who took on one of history's most filmed subjects, the Holocaust, and somehow made it feel terrifyingly new.
His film Son of Saul just completely reinvented the Holocaust movie. By using this tight, subjective camera that almost never leaves the main character, Nemes doesn't just show you the horror, he immerses you in it. It's a visceral, claustrophobic experience that, not surprisingly, won both an Oscar and the Grand Prix at Cannes.
Then you have someone like Ildiko Iñárritu, who explores the aftermath of trauma in a totally different way, by finding this unique poetry and magic in the everyday.
Iñárritu's style is often called magical realism. She has this amazing ability to blend the totally mundane with the surreal to create these deeply poignant and poetic films about human connection and identity. Her film On Body and Soul even won the top prize at the Berlin Film Festival, the Golden Bear.
And rounding out this incredible new wave is Cornel Mundruczó, a filmmaker who brings that old tradition of allegory roaring into the modern era. He is not afraid to be provocative and tackle social issues head-on.
Mundruczó really uses cinema as a tool for powerful social commentary. I mean, his film White God, which won a major prize at Cannes, uses a massive cast of stray dogs to create this stunning and powerful allegory for how society treats the marginalized. He's carrying on that great Hungarian tradition, but with a modern, international voice.
So, from the coded allegories of the communist years to the direct confrontations of today, Hungarian cinema has never, ever stopped wrestling with its own history. Which kind of leaves us with a final, difficult question. Can art truly heal a nation's trauma? Or can it only bear witness, making absolutely sure the ghosts of the past are never, ever forgotten?